Welcome back, guys, to the Beyond Condition podcast, the voice of bodybuilding, and welcome to our returning guest, who is a good friend of mine. And I'm so excited to have you back on the pod, Sonia.
I know. I'm happy to be back. When you messaged me, I was like, absolutely. Absolutely,
And
we will.
the thing is, and I want to talk about this on the podcast to, the listeners, of course, know my story, and
Yeah.
I'm very open about it. And we're going to be talking about food disorders and disordered eating and, the differences, the commonalities, and the behaviors we can pick up over the years. And I want to set the tone here for the listeners because you've been very influential without even really probably knowing how influential you've been in my own relationship with myself and food, talking with you on podcasts, and you've actually helped me with some GI stuff as well on the side of that. And what's great about you is that you're very factual. You know what you're fucking talking about, but you've called me out a couple of times and probably without even knowing it. And I respect you so much that actually, you really do have that balance of being able to talk about something, a subject of this nature, with it being relatable rather than, I think sometimes it can be this sort of isolated environment. And if someone's struggling, that's then very hard because when I struggled, I didn't want to really reach out to people because,
No, you
and
once you
that's why
admit you're
you're perfect.
struggling, you have to do something about it too, right? It can't just be like especially because we're doers. If something's wrong, we're gonna fix it, we're gonna work our way through it. And so if you say it out loud, it becomes one of those things that you have to now work through.
And it is. I think as well, like you say there with doers, it's like I'm trying to think how to word this properly, but when you're a competitor, when you're a bodybuilder, you'll be able to frame this as well. It's like you are a doer, and if you were to say, do you know what, I probably could do with a little bit of help here, it's viewed as often this sort of sign of weakness. But we
Yeah.
both know how much is your journey going to be amplified if you can
Yeah.
actually address things that are mentally challenging you so much that it's actually holding you back from your physique development.
What 100%. And I think sometimes just the hyper focus on physique and weight and numbers and macros and stuff can add a low grade chronic stress to our life that we're not even aware of. And I'm all for it. Like I'm all for pushing athletes and working when the time is to work, but at what cost during what season of your life can dictate the outcomes you're getting in each of those seasons for sure.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
it's that as well, the burying of if someone has come into the sport from a food disorder background. And I'm sure we can talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your story because that's going to relate as well. But it's like you're sort of, and this is not me, just saying this lightly, but you can end up masking and covering something for something else for something else. And it started
Perfect
here.
cover.
And it's the same, you're finding something to vent and funnel this, and it's framed as something else. And then bodybuilding, as you say, the perfect cover. Well, I've got to do it for the sport. So is people gonna, are they gonna ask the questions that they normally would because you're like, well, I'm an athlete, you know?
Yeah. You'll see it all the time. And I think bodybuilding is the perfect disguise for eating disorders because a lot of people, I shouldn't blanket statement this, but with eating disorders specifically, there's a lot of control and fear of loss of control that surrounds that. And so you have a sport that's so control focused about how dialed in can you be, how focused are you, how determined are you, how much are you willing to pay your dues, and it can easily be it's the perfect sport, right? Which is why people flock to it. It does push you in a sense of most people can't do it. Most people can't do it. It takes a certain kind of person to be able to do it. You have to be all in on that goal, non-negotiable, not socially influenceable, not like oh, I'll work today and tomorrow I'll take the time off. Like there are people who do that and they're not, you can see the difference on stage. And so it's very easy for people with control issues to lean towards an activity that's so control based. I mean, you look at like soccer or football or volleyball or any other sport, and you don't have the sense of control because it's a team sport and you can't control other people. This is the only sport that you can compete at your whole life. That's a single sport. It doesn't involve any team. That isn't like, it's not, it's you by yourself, and you can hide a lot in there as well.
Mm. Yeah, actually, as well, a sort of extension of that from the team side of things. actually from speaking with a lot more people over the years and sort of establishing myself as a coach, I guess, and learning what I want to offer to my clients, I've actually realized that a lot of my clients that have come from coaches and they've not had a great experience, as it were, that actually the team environment that can be built in bodybuilding when you're
Yeah.
sort of part of a coaching team, as it were, a lot of them, they've almost got sort of a not like a PTSD as such, but like a trauma response to, I don't want to be part of this sort of clicky team, as it were. And that can breed all sorts of things, can't it? When it comes to your behaviors with food.
Yeah, 100%. I think that one of the biggest changes we've had in the past year within our company is really utilizing the group aspect as almost a non-negotiable. Like we have group meetings multiple times a week and we have a group coaching call. And on that coaching call, we're talking about mindset and we're talking about community and connecting with other like-minded individuals who are going through the same thing as you. And this from coaching, and I'll share this for people who don't coach. This time of year, the holidays, is a fucking shit show with clients. They're extra neurotic, extra hyper, like just like multiple emails every single. They're just like the feeling is vibration. As a coach, you feel all your clients like vibrating on like a frequency that you're like, just want to give you a hug and some
I know.
some ashwagandha. Yeah, just calm down. And that's normal, right? This is not just in the coaching space. This is just for people because there's a lot of trauma and family and like the holidays stir up a lot for people, good and bad. And specifically because there's so much food focus and typically people gain weight and there's more eating out and there's more parties and all this stuff, it becomes a difficult time for clients and coaches alike because when it's hard for them, it's hard for us in the sense they bring that in. And I have noticed such a vast change in our clients this year, having implemented our program about 3.5, 4.5 months ago, of this community and getting connected and picking a pod where you have 3 or 4 people that you connect with and you talk to. And it's night and day different when you're talking to these people during check-ins right now because they're leaning on their pod, they're leaning on their higher power. We're working through kind of like more self-help mindset stuff every single week that we have an hour to do. Whereas a coaching session, even if I have 30 minutes and we're just talking about mindset, there's something that happens in community when you're collectively having these like self-discoveries together and other people are like, I do that too. And like, yeah, I've noticed myself doing that. This is what I've been doing lately. There's a aha moment where even if you weren't self-aware before, when other people start relating to that, you're like, oh, wow, shit, I really do this too. Like I grasp at straws when I feel unsafe and it has nothing to do with my program or my weight. It's an outside influence, or even just educating, like we've talked about on the female cycle and like, is this my mood? Is this other people? Or is this just me not feeling comfortable sitting in my skin right now? Like what is really going on in this moment? And it's been, like you said, that group community aspect has been night and day for us.
It is as well. It's finding that right group because when you get into these toxic traits and toxic groups,
Yeah.
it actually can breed, well, extensive list of pathologies, etc. If you nourish the right community vibe, fucking hell, Sonia, as you've just described,
Yeah.
I mean, it's so powerful. And even from the point of view of, and this is why you're very relatable because you're so honest and you're like, I'm Sonia here. Yes, I've got the tools and the education to take you where you need to be, but I'm a person. And this
Yeah.
again is something that, if you're leading a community that we need, and it's important as well for people listening, if there's groups that you can gravitate towards that are actually going to help nourish you and you find friends etc to pursue that, if you find toxic groups and people,
Yeah.
other than unfollow, what would you say for people that speak to you about this?
Yeah. So I think that the interesting thing, and this isn't the bodybuilding community, this is humans, is people love to connect on hate. People love, I hate this, you hate that too. Now we're best friends. More than like, oh, I like roses, you like roses. When I'm like, I hate lilies, and you're like, I hate lilies too. Now we can talk about how much we hate lilies and oh my gosh, they smell so bad. And did you see how expensive they were? And like, that's so silly. We can really niche down on that. And people, it's less vulnerable to talk about things that you hate than things that you love. Because if you love something and someone else doesn't love it, there's a fear of rejection there. I like this. Do you like this? versus like it's like a little bit different. And I think that people feel safer connecting on talking shit about people. And did you see this coach did that? And did you see this athlete? She doesn't look ready. And this person's running this protocol and this person's doing that. And I'm sure people do that. I mean, I work with one of the most controversial people in the functional health space, and that's fine. And the truth is like there's a lot of things that get said in every department of coaching, whether it's bodybuilding and functional health and this place and that place. And I always say, well, context is king here. Like, do you know, like, oh, this client, she was eating 1,200 calories. It's like, well, she's 105 pounds. I would have had I mean, she's got to lose weight. We got to put her in a calorie deficit. So like these things are so nuancy that it's like, I've definitely put clients on 1,000 calorie plan. Maybe their refeed's 2,500. So it like always just depends. Like I'm always like, where's the context of this? Like, how do we know what's really going on? Who did you hear this from? Because this could all be just a bunch of like malarkey, to be honest. And people will really fuel in that. And I think that the hardest thing is when a person seeks that out in a group, they're normally that person in the group too, which is always hard. And we have those people, right? And we have to love them the same way because they're in a place of hurt and they've lost trust for their body and they've lost trust in healing. And I have them and I know who they are. I could think of 5 right now. I'm like, these are the 5, and they're not like they're problem children at all, but like they need a different approach because they are fueled by emotional addiction. And so that is the other aspect in this whole kind of thing too, is that there's an aspect of addiction in eating disorders that's called emotional addiction. And in this emotional addiction, it's a dopamine rise. When I get worked up, my dopamine kicks and my adrenaline kicks and I get a little high. Have you ever been so mad at it? You're like, when you calm down, you're like, whew, that was like a rush, you know? Or like someone slams on their brakes and honks you and cuts you off is like a rush. People will relive in those moments talking about the same thing that happened. Oh, and my ex did this, and oh, he just messaged me, and oh, they did this, and did you know that they did that? Because they're getting that rise and they don't even realize that they're looking for a dopamine hit every time they do it. So they will seek out those conversations and seek out talking about those topics with every single person. And we all have those friends where I'm like, they're calling me and I'm like, I know you just called 4 other people before me to say the same fucking story, you know? You're
What
bitching about your boyfriend or something that happened or someone at work. And it's an addiction, right? So you have to kind of like understand where a person's coming from. They're not bad, they're in that addiction. And it's like, how do you identify when you are in that spot and how do you work through it? Right. Because that's at the end of spectrums, whether it's food or emotional addiction, you will see those, I think, more than anything else. I think drugs and addiction, eating disorders go together too, but I feel like emotional addiction and eating disorder behavior are so intertwined because it's the same sort of control. I feel like my life is out of control. I'm going to talk about how to control my life is I can control my food, control my functions, control my protocols. And you'll see those like this in all of these clients. In functional health, we have a lot more of these clients, I'd say, than in bodybuilding. Not like they don't have them in bodybuilding, but in the space of functional health, I think a lot of people get sick because of their emotional addiction and control, because we're holding on, we're anger, we're living in fight and flight, even though we're not stressed, like our job's okay in this, our mind and our words being spoken are keeping us in that sense of fight or flight response the entire time.
it is as well. It's like a victim mindset, isn't it?
It
We've
is, yeah. And I
yeah.
think that it is a victim mindset. And I think that in the place of healing, we have a whole, and I'll talk about this too, because our program, we have a, a program called Emotional Freedom Fellowship, and it's a 12-step program, and it's for anybody, your clients, my clients, anyone who wants to join. And they walk through that. And because it's based on just looking for emotional freedom instead of like, hey, you're a victim mindset, we have a lot more people coming in, right? Because it's true. We don't realize we're a victim mindset because you're like, no, it's not that I'm being a victim. This shit really fucking happened.
For
Or,
sure.
but you're not realizing you're living in that emotion chronically. And that's what keeps you sick. Yeah,
It's wild. It's such an internal job. It's
it
you have to,
really is.
it's like and I did it, and I'm sure you've done it at periods of time where you're just going from one thing to another in this victim mindset. One day you go, fuck this. It's
Yeah.
quite literally, it feels like your whole world can change in that moment when you actually realize. And I was talking to a friend about this the other day, actually, about, the epiphanies we can have on this journey of being able to deal with any of these things. So whether it's an actual food disorder, and that's going to be harder, of course. And then we've got disordered ways of thinking, acting, eating, etc.
Yeah.
All of these things and that emotional response, and this ties in really nicely, when you start to step away from them and start to accept and be able to move forward, you can have, and he described it as epiphanies, where it's like you've taken a fuck ton of like MDMA or something. You feel like these epiphanies, and you said like the addictions to drugs, you can get addicted to your own healing, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And this, people are going to be listening thinking, what are you talking about? But I know you're going to have an extension of this for me because it's so
Yeah.
true.
Yeah. It is really true. And you'll see it. Look, I'm an addict. It doesn't matter what I do, whether it's work, learning, like I hyper focus. It makes me good at what I do. And I have to know when I'm like, oh, okay, a minute, I need to like pause for a second because I do it with everything. Like we were getting a dog. And so like everything was like, I'm a fucking dog trainer now. I'm like
I
researching
know.
dogs, breeds. I'm like researching dog training. I'm like looking at every shelter, dog food, all the shit. Our dog passed away. I'm like, okay, I'm done. Now I'm looking at baby names and I'm thinking about fertility and I'm just like, I hype and I've got baby names. And then it's like we're getting married. So I'm like wedding dresses. It's like, it's a thing. And I have to be like, okay, I'm just going to like not focus on it. I can spot it now.
Yeah.
I still do it. It's not going to change. It's my genes. Like we can talk about genes in this function too, but it's the way I'm wired. And you can either be aware of the way that you're wired or you can let it take the best of you. Because before, what I do is I'd get to this place, and because I'm here doesn't mean everyone else is here. So I'm talking about it and I'm researching, I'm on my phone, like, and dogs and dogs. Every conversation is about a fucking dog. I'm dog songs, like it's all like focused. And other people will be like, this is too much. You know what I mean? But now I like can catch myself spiraling a little bit and be like, I'm going to pause. I'm going to take a break from like even looking at this. And there's a sense of peace and power that really comes from my ability to be self-aware of those moments. With healing, I think that it's another grasp at the straws. We're looking for the cause. Oh, well, the root cause and the root cause. And yes, there's a root cause. The longer I'm in the functional space, the more I'm finding the root cause might be more internal than external, in the sense of like your spirit versus your body. And we're seeing this a lot. And we're having these big epiphanies. It used to be, oh, the underlying root cause is like your Hashis or your gut and your brain or inflammation or mold or parasites. It's like, yeah, but other people are exposed and they're okay. You know what I mean? You can have the same people in the same house. One person is like experiencing symptoms and one is not. Now, detox, there's other issues that play a role in this. I'm not saying it's the only thing, but our body wants to heal itself. When we become hyper focused on healing, you'll see these people that are now like wake up and they've got a fucking 5-hour morning routine. It's like I wake up and then I meditate and then I journal and then I do a gratitude list and then I red light and then I go for fasted cardio and then I come back in cold plunge and then I do. And you're like, no, I get that all that stuff is good for you. I'm not saying it's not. And if that's your morning routine, I'm not throwing shade. But what are you holding on to where you have to be so ritualistic in the morning to make your day successful? It's one thing to do gratitude or prayer. I'm not knocking these things. There's so much value in, especially gratitude. It's the simple fact of when I have to do this, this is my morning routine. And it's like a 2-hour morning routine. It's like, at what part is this actually hindering you from getting the response you're trying to get? Because it's so rigid and so strict that you're like, oh, timer's up. I gotta get this. And if I don't get this, I don't feel okay. That's where I always ask people is like, I will literally like sometimes be like, okay, well, what if we removed tracking? How does that make you feel? And I'll pause and it'll be like tears. They won't even know why they're crying. They're just like tears are streaming down your face. You're like, okay, this is what I was worried about. Like, this is a thing for you, right? Like, this is actually a pain point, like the fear of not knowing what you're eating diligently, even though you've been tracking for years, like the fear of maybe not being in your perfect routine because it's out of order, or if you're traveling or you slept in accidentally, or you're, God forbid, your partner wants to cuddle in the morning. You're like, I've got to get up and do these things, which I used to do. And then I was like, wow, these things that I think are trying to make me better and longevity. Like there's pros and cons to them, but I'm waking up with high cortisol every morning because I got to get every one of these things done to be successful, you know? And so that's kind of the caveat. And I think that's always that balance. And this is where true self-reflection comes in, is you have to ask yourself, if I were to not do this for a week, would I feel like, I'm a little bit bummed, but I'm okay? Or would I feel a sense of chaos? And if you feel the sense of chaos thinking about letting go of that one thing, whether it's tracking or your morning routine or fasted cardio or cardio in general, like there's an issue there that you have to address. We've talked about this before, you and I, about letting go of tracking. And and it's hard, right? And the craziest thing happened because I'm like, I'm just going to kind of like not track and see what happens in a build. And I was like, I'm just going to kind of listen to my body a little bit. This is the first time I've ever done this. So I'm not some like guru that's like, you need to intuitively, this is my first time too, guys. And it was crazy because I didn't say anything to anybody because I didn't know if I could do it, you know?
Yeah.
But then one day, Matt was like, hey, I noticed you haven't been tracking and I know how hard that is. And I just want to say, like, I see you and it's pretty cool. And I was like, wow, that's because it's dinner and I'm at the dinner table and it's like, hold on, I've got to track my food because I don't remember what's on my plate real quick. You know, it's like, and it's everyone notices when I do it. So it's like, of course people would notice when I don't do it. You know, it's like one of those things. But it was honestly the best build and best my body has transformed. And who knows and I didn't weigh myself the entire time either. At the end of my build, and I used oxandrolone. So you're talking about your weight will go up, you're eating like I didn't. I just went off of like, I'm going to build right now and I'm just going to see how I physically feel strength wise and just focus on that. And it was by far the best body comp change I've ever had. And who knows what I ate or what my weight got up to exactly, you know? And I was like, wow, this was really a different experience for me because I might have gone up maybe more than I would have intended to go up. But because I didn't have the fear of like, oh, well, I'll do a little bit more steps tomorrow. Like I did a lot less walking than I ever did. I just kind of like, honestly, I was like, this is nice. This is really nice. Like just this, not how many steps did I get, hyper focused on this, tracking all this stuff. It gave me a sense of freedom. And I think because I didn't have that extra cortisol and extra like focus on blood sugars and all this stuff, it made my body respond better because I had that much less of that kind of like chronic low grade stress, which for me is that, you know, blood sugars and weight and all these things. It's hard not to be like, why is it up? What's wrong? Do I need to change my food? And then you overcorrect when you just needed to stay the course, you know?
Yeah, it is. When you look at vectors of progress, a lot of the things that have, the hyperfixation type things that we can start to accrue over time. I think that, there could be people listening that don't realize how many things they're actually checking. And actually, I truly believe, I really do believe what you're saying there. A lot of these things can actually be counterproductive because they are such a mental strain that you end up you're just, and I really like how you frame the sort of morning routines. It's like you're just controlling all the time. The mental fatigue, we can both
Yeah.
sit here, we know,
Yeah. Yeah.
I haven't had a food disorder as such, but the disordered way I was living, you know how it is, and what you've been through, we've been there, guys. Like it's so lonely, Sonia. Like it's
Yeah.
quite. I don't know if you have these reflections yourself when you look back at things. It's like I think back and I think I wish, well, like you said with your clients, I wish I could go and give myself a hug and just say you're gonna be all right, and actually give myself
Yeah.
talk rather than just be imprisoned by this fucking chaos and no one even knows, you know?
Yeah. No one knows. Yeah. Because it's self inflicted. And it's like, oh no, I enjoy doing this. It makes me feel good. This is what I'm doing. I'm an athlete. I can
Yeah.
hide this in this, right? Like, this is the perfect place for me. I found my tribe. And it's like, at the same time, you know, like, yes, I have reflected back. Even so, like, when I started doing work on this, I called my ex husband and I was like, hey, like, I'm really sorry. Like, I think a lot of that stress and kind of like anger and kind of like snippiness was just being in full blown in my eating disorder and not realizing it because I was competing, but I was always thinking about like, oh, I can't eat out there. We can't go there. This is that. It's like just hyper. And even when we'd be sitting down on the couch, I'd be like planning my macros for the next day instead of just like watching TV and hanging out. And you're like, it's fucking tomorrow. These are things you haven't even eaten. And you're like perfectly diligently planning your food so you know exactly how to execute your food, and then, okay, if something changes, it's kind of like this neurotic, like obsessive game. You're like, of Tetris. And it's like, and then if something would throw off that at all, it felt like my whole world was crumbling. And of course I'd get angry and upset, and like I'd feel like I could feel my body changing out of not out of lack of control. It was probably just fucking cortisol dumping, to be honest with you. But it was a lot of me having to go back and be like, I didn't even realize this was going on. Like I'm sorry for like my part in and the way that I was expressing myself in that, because a lot of that came from the feeling of like unease and chaos and dysfunction as well, because that's where, what you said it perfectly, like nobody knows what's going on, because you're lean and you're just constantly complimenting how lean you are and how strong you look, and you look like a bodybuilder and all these things. You're living in a little hell, and you're silently suffering for sure.
Yeah, it's I think back to like everything you've described there, so many opportunities to, talk about these things, because there will be people listening. I can almost guarantee it, that are thinking, I do that, I do that. And that's the point of a podcast, right? If you want to gain something from a podcast and insight and tools, it's like the resonation there. And that's why, you are a good person to talk to about this, because we both give examples of like, as you say, eating out. I'd phone the restaurant round the corner. Everyone would start walking up, and I'd be 2 secs, and I'm phoning saying, "Have you got a plain chicken breast in?" And all of these things. It's such wild things from an outsider's point of view. But I needed to know there's a chicken breast that is there for
Yeah.
me, having that restaurant, to make sure it's plain with no sauce. And it's certain things we need to do in the competitive realm, and it's not getting away from that.
Yeah.
But, a lot of the things that we hyperfixate on, it just literally, you're in this, you're not even present, and and my main, I guess, message here as well is that you're probably not enjoying it as much as you could, because you can't
Yeah.
be present. Because your mind is, as you say, it's like Tetris or the Matrix. You're
Mm-hmm.
never really there, are you?
Yeah, yeah, it's like a disassociation 90% of the time. So even when people are talking to you, you're like thinking about other things in that sense, or you're like, oh, you're sitting at dinner and you're thinking about your food, and other people are thinking about the conversation that's being had in there in the moment. And you're thinking about the food, how much salt was in there, did you say this, did they order it, did you trust the cook, what if the cook, oh, that looks like more oil than I thought, and then so now you're not eating, there's so many different aspects of it. And again, I think that plays partly into that emotional addiction too, where it's like, if you're somebody who's thinking about your food most of the time, you probably have a food disorder. There are people who go through their entire day and they don't. And I'm going to give a perfect example. So my kids, so my daughter is my biological daughter, and obviously my son is Matt's son. So different genetics there. And my daughter is definitely my daughter. She wakes up and she's like, what? It's 6 a.m. And it's like, what are we having for breakfast? Mommy, what are we going to eat for dinner tonight? She, at night before she goes to bed, she prays for yummy food for the next day. You ask her, she went to Sydney, Australia, a 9-year-old in Sydney. I said, what is your favorite part about the trip? She goes, the buffet. It was
I
all
love
you
it.
could eat. And I could go at any time. She went with her dad. I could go at any time. I could just walk out of my hotel room and go get food. This is her fate. She went to fucking Sydney, Australia, and this is what she has to show, the fairy bread and pizza. And I'm like, this is crazy. And same thing. What was your favorite thing? We just got back from Mexico. She's like, the French fries. It's like, it's so food focused. And she's like, when are we gonna eat? What are we gonna eat? When are we gonna be there? What time are we? What are the? She's got, and she's 9, and it's not like, I used to think, oh, it's because she sees me talk about this, but we don't. My kids are gone during the day. I don't ever say like fat or thin or weight loss. I try to be really kind of like hyper vigilant about that, because in my family growing up, we talked about weight and weight loss all the time. We always talk about eating for energy. If they see me weighing, I'm always tracking to make sure I'm getting enough protein in. We always talk about getting enough food in, getting enough of the vitamins in, never like too much or not like, but still she's been like this since a young age. And it's like my son, it's like he will forget to eat. It's like he doesn't care what we eat for dinner because it's breakfast time. He's not thinking about what we're going to have. He's not worried we're not going to have enough food later. He's not like, he doesn't have that. She's going to struggle because she already genetically has that hyperfixation on food, where you're like, hey, she'll eat past full, she'll eat foods that don't make her tummy feel good. Like Easton will be like, that doesn't make my tummy feel good, I don't want to eat it. It's like, she's like, I know it won't make me feel good. I eat it and then I feel like I have a tummy ache afterward. It's just there. We're wired differently sometimes, but at least I have an awareness where it's like, as when she becomes old enough, we can start talking about these things. And she's been in therapy a little bit for other things. I don't want to have her focus too much on it because she's so young, but it's like, I can see it clear as day. I can see it happening. Maybe you're listening and you're like, yes, I'm one of those people. I think about food all the time. It's like, great, you're an addict. And so the best way to work through that is to just be aware, right? And to surrender to the fact that you have no control. It doesn't matter how much you have to surrender, because you can't control. You're trying to control something you can't control. And that is what's giving you that chaotic feeling inside of your body and your mind all the fucking time. Is you have to just be like, I'm powerless. This is the situation, and then work through it. I don't think like powerless, you just give up, but you have to at least surrender to the fact that you have these behaviors. Everyone else fucking sees it. I guarantee. If you are not sure if you have this behavior, find someone who's close to you and call them and have a real fucking conversation. Hey, I heard this podcast today. They were saying these things. Like, I was wondering if you felt like, and just leave it there. And they're gonna be like, I don't think that's you at all. Or they're gonna be like, yeah, we need to talk about this. You absolutely are like this, because the people who love you and are around you will see it, guaranteed. And before you will even be aware of what's going on.
For sure. And this translates into, my coaching ethos is that if I notice things, and I always say, however difficult this conversation is, yes, you're paying me to help you with your physique development
Yeah.
journey. But if I notice things, I'm gonna be honest. And it's so fucking important. And this is where, as well, the detriment to the bodybuilding side of things and the community and what coaches do put out there. If you're just being delivered this plan and there's no communication, there's no support, like no one's understanding maybe your genetics, your preferences, your background. If you used to be overweight or you used to be underweight, how's that affecting your bodybuilding? And then we're left, and it's a very difficult scenario to be in because you or I can't sit here and really do much about it, as it were.
Yeah.
But people are gonna, and I thought it for many years that I was normal. Like this is bodybuilding. This is bodybuilding. I'm meant to be thinking about food all the time. I'm meant to be neurotic. Everyone's meant to think there's something wrong with me because I'm a bodybuilder, if you know what I mean. And it's quite
Yeah.
difficult because,
There's a
if people
pride in it almost.
there is, yeah, and that's where I like where you've said about if people do this and ask your loved one, because also an extension, if your coach isn't, if it's not a personable relationship, as it were, and it's more a sort of here's your plan, get on with it, maybe you could actually speak to people in your family or your friends, etc., and start that sort of reflection and acceptance.
Yeah, because remember, not every coach, I mean, we're not trained psychologists,
No, no.
and there's a lot of incredible coaches that are probably dealing with the same thing. And their job is to push their athletes, and maybe they're not picking up on the cues, which there are cues. I promise you'll see it. It's those people, they email, it's I ate one carb over, it's those, my eye twitched 4 times today. Like, what do you think? I'm like, something's wrong with me? Or like, do you need, like the tiniest little nuances, or like give them anxiety if they don't have it exactly laid out. It's like, it's that fear that's like resonating through them. And that's where it's kind of like a hard conversation to have sometimes with like, hey, is this coaching hurting or hindering your progress? Right. And I've had that conversation with clients from like, I think that like we need to step back from coaching, because it's like, yes, it's a business. Obviously people want to make money, but at the same time, you have to know when you're doing a client a disservice by fueling their disordered behavior, and if they're not willing to work with you on intuitive eating and all these other things, then maybe it's a time to take a step back from coaching and say, why don't you take a 2-month pause for coaching, and just work on not tracking and not checking in and not worrying about your weight and not looking at your blood sugars, and not, especially biofeedback and functional healing, because we're tracking blood sugars, we're tracking HRV, we're looking at steps, we're looking at mood, we're looking at bowel movements, we're looking at so many different things that it's like, maybe it's this was I bloated today? Am I bloated right now? Am I like all this hyper focus on your recovery that's actually hindering you? And there's absolutely, it's hard because we're in the space of online coaching. So yes, I need to know if you're bloated after your meals, but sometimes hyper focusing on like, is something wrong? It's like, you get your period and you're a little bloated, so you're like, I'm my immune system's overactive again and I'm gonna die. And you're like, okay, that's your period. And that happens to all of us. Everyone holds a little water weight around ovulation, like we're gonna be okay. But those are the people that are like, they're really struggling. And like, I just, like you said, you're like, you just want to give them a hug. But at the same time, if people aren't willing to be proactive about that journey, healing that emotional addiction, that thrill that they're looking for, like if they're not aware that that's dopamine seeking behavior, you can't do much with it in the sense of healing anyways. They will be people that you spin your wheels with because it's not the program, it's not the protocol, it's not even the root cause. Their gut is probably being influenced more by their mind than their gut microbiome.
I'm so glad you said that as well, because the relationship between the gut and the mental health side of things, I still feel, I know probably in America it's maybe explored more. It's so underrated, Sonia. Like I
Oh,
often these, I'll be out for a walk and I think, how can I get the message across to the world? And this is why I'm glad you've mentioned it. How important the impact of your mental health and your mental state is on your
mm-hmm.
GI function. But again, it's like how can us two spread that message as much as we can? But
Yeah.
it's like it's wild. It is
It's
fucking.
wild. Yeah. When you start really understanding hormones influence on neurotransmitters and gut influence on neurotransmitters, you can start to see things in people where you're like, yes. We know that serotonin's made in the gut. We know the dopamine's made in the gut. The majority of these neurotransmitters are made in the gut. Those are our calming hormones. Those are our happy hormones. And then we see that antidepressants cause more dysfunction in the gut, which is why people have a harder time coming off of them than when they first came on them. Like there's so many caveats there. But in the same response, we know that hormones, when you have low estradiol and low estrogens, estrogen converts into basically an easy way to explain this is into hydroxy enzyme, which converts 5-HTP into tryptophan into serotonin. There's a trickle down. So basically, estrogen has a direct correlation to serotonin in the conversion from 5-HTP into serotonin inside the body. When you have low estrogens, you can't make that conversion. It doesn't matter if you take 5-HTP, you don't have the enzyme to convert 5-HTP into serotonin. In the olden days, this was like like, oh, there's a dinosaur over there. There's the sky is falling. This is happening. Now it's my partner's breathing too loud. The guy at work is annoying. I didn't like the tone of that email. I didn't like the how long that person cut me. Like it's other people. This person's doing this and this person's doing that. And this is what bothers me. And that's what bothers me. And that's a low serotonin thing. And that constant negative feedback loop that you're talking about and thinking about now influences all the rest of your stuff. So it's kind of like this domino falling. We see this in women with low estrogen. You can see mood change in perimenopause when estrogen starts to decline. We see this post ovulation after we ovulate and all of our hormones go down, or right before our period. It's like a low serotonin thing going on. It's not everyone else. It's not that you're crazy. It's just a dysfunction in your neurotransmitters, and that can influence your entire personality.
It's wild when it happened as well. And again, this is back to accepting these phases and the things that if you notice patterns with you in yourself, I think this is important sort of part of the journey, as it were. If you want to work on these things, maybe you're at this point, you're listening, thinking, I don't want to work on these things. That's a personal decision. But noticing trends, noticing how you feel, noticing things that affect your mood, noticing foods that affect your mood, the list sort of goes
Yeah.
on. Starting to actually, take stock of that, it's actually quite cathartic and it feeds into what you said about addiction with the emotional side of things. It's like, actually, could you get addicted to healing almost,
Yeah.
in a roundabout way? And but that's
Yeah.
what happened to me, I think. Like just talking out loud, it's like I'm so addicted to feeling freer in my mind
You're
that
like, what else can I get rid of?
yeah, yeah, I'm like, oh my God. And it's so fucking exciting because it really does help. And you touched on as well your growth phase and how successful that was. I think, again, for anyone listening that's been in a prep and, these things, maybe it's your first prep, right? Or you're a seasoned competitor and these things are creeping in, maybe disordered ways of thinking, etc. I personally believe that the off season is the perfect example of a space where you can actually evolve, how you feel and what's happened before the prep,
Yeah.
who you are as a person. And then you can actually have this sort of graduated response as you get your hormones back, you come through the reverse out, and you can start
Mhm.
to work on things. I'm sure you'll agree there with the fate, because you know what it's like. I haven't got time to deal with this. I'm a competitor. I'll be in prep again soon, but we have got an opportunity in the growth phase, I believe.
Absolutely. I think that I'm starting to see it more where coaches will push that more on their clients who are more rigid to be social, go out, connect, have fun, whether it's the use of psilocybin to kind of calm that down or MDMA to kind of calm that down, have free meals, intuitively eat. I'll see it in a lot of really good coaches who have, like I said, rigid clients who they kind of have to push out. Right. We all have those clients where like, dude, it's an off season. It's not a free for all. Like you still want to compete. Like you're out drinking and doing all this stuff. Like we got to reel it in a little bit. But I do see there's like a change in the industry, which I think is for the better. I think every year the industry does get better. It's nice to see more focus on mental health and the grit of embracing what it is when it is and then getting out, like using it as a season. I think longer off seasons are very sexy right now. I took 2 years off. I took 3 years off. I took 2 years off. You'll see it more with like competitors, especially my friends. It's like I have a friend and it's funny because we're obviously talking to friends about weddings. It's like, oh, it's competition season, and it's like Matt said, when is it not competition season? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's always going to be something, right? There's always going to be something like that's always for certain people. It's always that's the first thought for them, versus like, oh, my friend's getting married. It's like the first I was like, it's competition season. It's like, yeah, it is. There's a ton of fucking shows. You know what I mean? It's like we're a year out. We're talking about the next year. So like we're plenty of months out. I think they caught themselves though and was like, but I wouldn't miss the wedding for like any, it was like it was first, it was the first thing. But that's that awareness that I love to see. And the thing is if you're listening and you're like, I don't think I'm this, but I really want to know, here's what you do. You pick 3 people that are close to you and you call them and you have a real conversation with them about these things. Like, would you say I'm a glass half full or half empty kind of person? Do you think I speak more negative? Or you find people that are going to tell you truth, not going to hype you up. We all have those friends that, oh, hell no, you never like, those are your friends. I'm not saying they're not. Those aren't the people you're looking for. You're looking for the people like your parent or like your sister that are going to tell you the fucking truth. And if you're finding yourself leaning more towards like, I'm constantly being negative, I have a very half empty mindset, I am very hyper focused on these things. Like, you're good, you're safe, you're us. Like, we love you. There's nothing wrong with you, but there's something that you can do to make yourself feel better where you're not living in that anymore. And that is where like true recovery from that emotional addiction or that food focus or that disordered eating really comes in. Remember, an eating disorder and disordered eating aren't always the same. We've talked about this. You can have very disordered thoughts about food and eating, hyper focus on tracking, and not necessarily have a clinical eating disorder. Both will create just as much conflict in your life because they're robbing you of the ability to be present. You're disassociating in those things as well. So I'd say find people you trust and lean on them to kind of help you reflect because it's going to be hard for you to see. And I think that it wasn't easy for me to see until my friends were like, it's your off season. Why are you so focused on tracking? And I was like, wait, you guys are not? And they're like, I mean, we track a little bit, but not like every splash of almond milk, like us, we've talked about half the green bean, it's like, it's fucking crazy, we're being a little bit weird. And it's like, wow, I'm starting to feel weird because I'm the only one of my friends who's doing this in their off season. And like, what's really going on here?
And it's crazy. When you look back, you're like, did I really bloody do that? It's like,
Yeah, we
and,
did.
and now we can actually, again, that's not, if someone's listening and they're in the fucking thick of this, and it's like, it's by no means funny, but actually now, I can find people like yourselves and I can sort of have that bit of banter and light-hearted and think, bloody hell, I was, really wild there and these things
Yeah.
happen. that actually as well is part of my own personal healing. Maybe someone's listening and they think, fucking hell, I'd never want to, think of this in a light-hearted manner. But I've realized that I am allowed to have fun in life. I'm allowed to enjoy eating food because it tastes nice. Like, whoa,
Yes.
this is weird. Like, not because of the macros, because I actually want to eat it. And, talking with people like yourself, where I'm just like, God, we've got so many similarities. Look at what we did, but look at how far we've come. And I
Yeah.
feel that's part of the healing as well when we're talking about the emotional addictions and the side of
Yeah.
it. Rather than being so fucking militant with yourself all the time, it just
And
adds like tons.
it'll be every part of life. It'll be like, I need to better myself. I got to read 50 pages every week. You're like, it's
How do you
that
know I did
75
that?
hard, it's like, it's great to have goals. I fucking love having goals. Like I do it every January. I'm like, no TV. I'm just going to read. I have a goal of, it was one book a year because I was doing none. And then it was two books. And then I did three books this last year. But I actually wanted to do four, but I got three. And I was like, that's good enough. Whereas before I would have been like, I have to get this fourth book in. And
Yeah.
so next year it'll be, I'm just trying to like layer things in there. But even something I found for myself is like with work, I used to work all the time. The minute I rolled out of bed, I'd walk over to my computer, turn it on, I'd make a tea or coffee or something. I'd drink that. I'd work. Then I'd go eat breakfast, come back and work. I'd do whatever, go to everything. Even at night after I ate dinner, I'd go to my computer, finish checking emails, do a little bit of work. There's always something to do in the world of coaching and online, right? Whether it's a post or protocols or there's always something. You can always turn your computer to work.
Yeah.
I work less now than I ever have in the world of coaching. And I am 10x at what I do in my performance. We're like, I almost have to like slow down a little bit because what's happening is like my boss will be like, oh, you're working at 10x. So I'm like, okay, wait, we got to like actually be realistic here because I don't want to add more hours. I'm so productive in the time I have because I work from like 9 to 4 and then I'm like sometimes like 9 to 3. But I'm so dialed in at the time that I'm working because I'm not overworking at other times. I'm so fucking, I just execute when I'm working and I'm present and I'm efficient and I'm like doing it because I'm not burnt out. I don't always take a lunch break. I could be better about that. But the fact that I work until 3 or 4, I'm like, I can just work through my lunch break. But at the end of the day, it's like, I'm so much better because when I'm done with work, I'm done. So I'm excited to get there the next day. And then I deal with the problem the next day. Even if I see an email, I'm like, I'll deal with the problem the next day. Every once in a while, we have people I could, someone needs something. I'm like, that's fine. I'm here. I still love my job and I love my clients, but I'm so much better because I've stopped thinking about being successful as a measurement of how hard and how long I'm working. And I've started measuring success and how productive I am with the minimal amount of time that I'm working. And that has been a game changer for my relationships, but also my work as well.
Because you're actually happy.
Yeah. And I'm not burning the candle. And
It's
I find myself more focused in the sense of like I don't know if you're like me, but like I have so many thoughts and so many ideas and so many different directions I could go in throughout the day, so many projects, especially because I coach. I oversee our priority select program, which is our VIP program. So I'm a master coach that I build our education and I also build all the presentations for Vince, the owner of our company. Like I can always find something to squirrel off on, but at the end of the day, it's like what I find is that I'm better suited at finishing a task when I do it. Like I'm doing this right now and doing that. Whereas when I'm working so much all the time, because I'm not getting much done, I feel like I'm 25% at all the things that I'm doing instead of being 100% at the 5 things that I'm doing for that day. Like I'm not doing that today. I'm doing these 5 things. I'm doing these calls and I'm doing these 5 projects and then I'm not doing anything else. And then tomorrow I'll do those other 5 things and I'll do it well. And it's like I said, it's those small things. And I'm telling you, this has been years in the making of working on this and honestly having a partner that pushes you to like challenge your mindset around those things. Because if I don't have that, I have another workaholic partner. Maybe I'm in the same working all the time space. And like I'm thinking, oh, because I'm working all the time, I'm so successful and I have all this stuff. Like it's totally a different scenario. He definitely pushes me to get more uncomfortable with those things. But it's been a year and a half of like really implementing that. And it's been a game changer for honestly, like I'm doing better financially. I'm doing better as a coach than I ever have because of these boundaries that I've set in place around this as well.
Yeah, and boundaries as well. I mean, we could say that for another
That's a
podcast.
whole nother,
Yeah,
yeah.
boundaries is yeah, but it's in summary as well, it's like all of these things, as you've just described there, it takes time. If you do listen and you're picking up that potentially there is things on your peripheral, and the first point
And
is acknowledgement, and that comes with acceptance. The second point is, what can you then do about it if you're ready to maybe reach out to people as you've described. And then, of course, it's that exploration of allowing yourself to be part of this. This is a journey. It's not like, oh, tomorrow I'm going to wake up and never weigh all of my food that I eat every day. It's
yeah,
a graduated response. And I guess to sort of wrap up as well would be a good, I guess, ending statement, as it were. If people are, being coached, where they're in the bodybuilding journey, they're very much at that point where they just want to continue doing the bodybuilding and competing. Do you personally think that people can work with coaches alongside their bodybuilding coach for the food relationship side of things, as someone like yourself or a practitioner in this space?
yeah. So I would say that so what where I work in function, I work in with physique athletes. I work on the functional side of things. We have our program, the EFF program, Emotional Fellowship Freedom Program. That's a anyone can come, anyone can join. It has nothing to do with food. It has nothing to do with your macros. It has nothing to do. It's all about the internal work. I think that that is anybody can come, like anyone in the world. We have times for people in the UK, like anyone can come. I think that if you're gonna work, I always wonder about too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
So I think that like as a functional practitioner, I work with a couple different food therapists with clients that I'll recommend out that we work alongside. And I'm always basing the recommendations off the most important, the biggest fuck, big and little fucks. What does that person say that we need to be doing with food? We can be taking care of supplements or like stress or mind, like, but if that person says we're not tracking, we're not tracking. You won't always have bodybuilding coaches that are going to be
Right.
proactive, because what's the point of having a bodybuilding coach if they're not going to be tracking your food? Unless they're a good coach and they're like, well, we're going to track training intensity and all these other things. It's about having the right person, the right people in the right places with anything, right? I
Mhm.
think it can be a lot of people trying to do different things at the same time. And for a person who's already feeling conflicted and like they can't trust themselves, having
Yeah.
multiple people coming in multiple different aspects is stressful for them. I even say it with clients who are like working with other functional doctors. It's like, I want to work alongside of you, but if I feel at any point like this person is going against what we're doing, like I think it's best we pause until you're done working with them, because it's going to add more stress to you. I don't want you to be conflicted. At the end of the day, it's like if their doctor, I'm not a doctor, if their doctor is saying something, even though I don't agree, I'm going to say, this is why I probably wouldn't do this, but we're going to go with what your doctor says because I need you to feel safe. And if I'm giving you conflicting information constantly than something your doctor, your functional doctor is giving you, you're going to feel like you have to choose children, and it's going to add more stress, because no matter what we do, you're always going to wonder if it's the wrong thing. And no matter what you do from then, you're always going to wonder if it's the wrong thing. And that's going to cause more chaos. But there will be people who don't know that underlyingly they feel best there because it's giving them a rise, and they will seek out things like that. They're like, I have a trainer and I have a bodybuilding coach and I have this person and I have a mindset. And it's like they have so much going on because it's giving them that feeling that they're addicted to. So it's kind of like you have to choose, I think, wisely if it's adding or hindering to be working alongside both. I think if you're doing EFF, it's a 12-step group. They meet weekly. Like that's not, you're not getting a protocol from them. That's one thing. I think that with any bodybuilding environment adds a different aspect of power to a person. But I think working alongside two practitioners at the same time, two coaches at the same time, can be a little bit hard on the client if they're not completely in line with each other.
Yeah, as a sort of trio, as it were, to
Yeah.
be a team, isn't it? And support that. I guess it's as well the same as if you had a therapist at the same time as having a bodybuilding coach. That can work very well because it's very
Yeah.
different avenues
Yes.
going to complement the journey as well.
Yes. Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
that. I'm glad
Yeah.
I asked because you've always got good perspectives that you can share. Now, if so, the program that you do, if anyone's listening and they wanted to look at that, how is it through your Instagram? Have you got like a bio? How does that work?
No, so it's Outsized House. It's I'm gonna get the website right now because they just launched a website. It is, and I'll send it to you. It's
Sweet.
emotionalfreedomfellowship.org. I'm gonna send you the link so you can put it in the show notes too. And that's anyone can come. It's just like come be a fly on the wall. Here's what I tell people: like, come check it out. Do 2 meetings. If you don't feel like you belong, don't come back because you're gonna know when the words are spoken from other people. You're gonna go, wow, I've never felt so seen or heard. This sounds a lot like. How are there so many people just like me in the same room that are sharing the thoughts I haven't been able to verbalize? Or you're gonna be like, I don't relate to this at all, and then that's okay too. Like either way, like there's no you don't have to turn your camera on. You don't even have to say your real name. Like
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
anonymous. So like come be a part. You might feel like you're at home. You might find connection. You might find healing and grace, or you might not belong there. And this might not be the right thing for you. And either way, it's like, what does it take 2 hours out of your life to figure out whether or not you can find healing through this process? It's like, I mean, that seems like a pretty low commitment to me.
Yeah. And of course, maybe we will look at later in the year doing one on boundaries. We can just literally call it boundaries.
Yeah, we can do it in boundaries.
Yeah, it's
I'm not
wild.
the best with boundaries. Yeah, I'm a boundary pusher, and I'm not very good with boundaries. But we can do it on boundaries. We can speak on it. Do I live it all the time? Like speaking it and living it. And you know this too. Like even the people who preach on boundaries aren't always going to be that. Boundaries are going to be the hardest thing in relationships and in work. Boundaries are, they don't feel good when they're set. They don't feel good setting them. Boundaries are one of those things where it's like, it's not a feel good moment unless you're like, I finally stood up for myself, you know? Normally you have that and then it feels like guilt. You know, you're like, this didn't feel good either. It's the long term effect of having those boundaries. It's the freedom and the peace that comes with going to work because I have those boundaries that makes a difference. Yeah.
Oh, thank
Cool.
you for coming back on. I always
Absolutely.
appreciate it. And thanks again for just being a good friend and a good fucking
Yeah.
person. You are ace.
All right, sweetie. I'll talk to you later. Bye.
Bye.